for people who weren't able to join. So please, we will be recording just so you're aware, and it looks like we just started that, so great. We do have we have 2 ADA qualified American Sign Language interpreters available during the meeting today. Because I'll be sharing my screen to show the presentation, Zoom is going to minimize the interpreter's video into small boxes, but we're going to try and overcome that by spotlighting the 2 ASL interpreters as they speak today, which will allow them to be present throughout the meeting. Please make sure that your view is either set to gallery mode or side-by-side mode to use this feature. You should be able to enlarge the ASL interpreter's screen so you can see them clearly by clicking on the little kind of white bar that I have pointed out in this presentation slide here. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to chat with the hosts and co-hosts, and we'll do our best to help you sort that out. We also have closed captioning available for today's workshop. So I have enabled live transcript. You'll see the closed caption icon on the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, that will enable closed captioning so that you can see the transcript today. We do have the chat bar enabled today. So to participate in the chat, just click on the icon that I have represented on this slide here. You'll only be able to message with the host and the panelists today. Once you click on that icon, the chat bar will pop up on the right-hand side. You can type in your text there, and we'll be able to see what you wrote. So we're going to practice that now. If you haven't done this already, please type your name and your title and agency, if that's applicable, into the chat bar so that we can record the attendance for the day today. If you have questions at all today, the best way to ask questions is through the question and answer feature of Zoom. You can see the little icon that is highlighted on the slide here. Once you click on that icon, it will bring up a box. You can type in your question and the hosts and panelists will see your questions. Please feel free to type in questions and answers throughout the presentation today, but we will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. And again, for those of you that may have just joined, we will be recording this presentation today and posting the recording on our website for those people who are unable to join. All right, now that we've gotten some of the Zoom basics out of the way for today's meeting, I want to introduce myself. My name is Emma Giardina. I'm the Infrastructure Program Manager for Philadelphia's Office of Emergency Management, and I'm really excited to welcome you all to the 2022 Hazard Mitigation Plan Draft Review Workshop. So first, we're going to start with a few opening remarks. I'm going to pass it over to Carolyn Keaton, Deputy Director for Office of Emergency Management, for a few words.
Hi there, sorry for the delay, Emma, having some trouble getting on video. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As Emma said, I'm Carolyn Keaton, Deputy Director for the Office of Emergency Management, and we're so excited to share this Hazard Mitigation Plan update with all of you today. This has been a process that's been underway for just about over 2 years. In fact, we kicked off one of our first work groups back in February 2020, and I think many of you will know what came after that. We found ourselves dealing with a pandemic, many of us in lockdown, but I really have to hand it to the Hazard Mitigation Planning Steering Committee, to Emma's leadership for persevering through the past 2 years to really give us probably one of the best hazard mitigation plans our city has ever seen. Of course, today is all about the public, and it's about you. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback. So we'll go over what's in the plan, and then we'll go through the process of what you can do to participate in giving us feedback and providing your input. So with that, I will turn it back over to Emma. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Carolyn. Next, we'll hear from Fire Commissioner and OEM Director Adam Teal, and he'll give us a few words.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Carolyn, and most of all, thanks to all of you for taking the time to participate in this very important workshop. Many of you and your organizations have spent time along with us and our great team over the past couple of years working through this very extensive process. This plan is so important for our city, for our neighborhoods, to help provide access to additional resources from the federal government, state government, and others to correct a lot of the challenges and really work through a lot of the difficult challenges that we face here across the city of Philadelphia. I think everybody has seen that. Of course, those of us who live and work here are very familiar with a lot of those challenges and very familiar with the legacy and the historical inequities that together we have to continue to work through. This plan is a vital part of that, as we've seen over the past couple of years. And again, I want to echo my appreciation for Emma, Carolyn, the whole team that's worked so hard on this, all of our partners and stakeholders, and again, all of you. So we'll have a great session here. Certainly encourage everyone to participate fully and candidly in this process, and turn it back over to Emma. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. All right. So the agenda for today, I'm going to start off by giving everyone an overview of the plan and the planning process that we went through over the last 2 years. I'm going to go through a summary of some of the key updates that you'll see in the 2022 plan, and then we'll talk through next steps and how you can participate in reviewing the plan and providing us with feedback. I do want to highlight that this workshop is really the kickoff to a 30-day public review and feedback comment period. So after this workshop today, I highly recommend that you head over to our website at www.phila.gov/ready to view a draft of our 2022 plan and to provide us with any feedback that you might have. You can provide feedback in a lot of different ways. We do have a feedback form that you can fill out that is linked to our website. You can also reach us by emailing oem@phila.gov. I'll review how you can provide feedback again at the end of this workshop, but I just wanted to highlight that for anyone who may need to step away a little bit early. All right, so what is the Hazard Mitigation Plan? The Hazard Mitigation Plan really does two big things. First, it identifies what are the hazards that Philadelphia is most prone to. These include both natural hazards and human-caused hazards and threats. The second thing the plan does is it identifies what is the city going to do to reduce our risk to these hazards. What are the plans, policies, and programs that we can implement to reduce our risk? Two important things about this plan. This is a public-facing plan that is available on our website, and this will be our third version of the plan. So our first plan was adopted by City Council in 2012. That plan was then updated and adopted in May of 2017. And then this final plan will be, or I'm sorry, not final plan, but third plan will be expired in May of 2022. And that's the plan that we'll be talking about today. So it is public facing, it's available on our website. And the second thing is that this plan is a requirement by FEMA. We must update this plan every 5 years in order for the city to be eligible for mitigation funding, both pre-disaster and post-disaster. Another important thing is to think about what is hazard mitigation. And so hazard mitigation is really a sustained action that really focuses on either reducing or completely eliminating the long-term risk of a hazard to either human life or to property. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail as we go through the presentation. So why is hazard mitigation planning important? Well, first and foremost, by finding ways that we can reduce risk before disaster strikes, we're really ultimately saving lives and preventing future property damage, which is really important. Second, we know that mitigation saves money. So there was a study that shows that for every $1 that we invest in mitigation, we're saving $6 in future response and recovery operations. So it's really important to note. And this plan is really tied to recovery efforts as well, and helps us to establish our funding priorities, especially post-disaster when a lot of funding becomes available. So it really gives us a good punch list of projects to start working through to make our community more resilient and build back stronger after different hazards take place. And finally, the hazard mitigation planning process in and of itself is a way of raising awareness about the hazards that we should be preparing for as a city. And also it helps to build partnerships. So I'll talk a little bit later about the number of agencies and organizations and community partners that were involved. And so this really facilitates conversations around how we can all work together to reduce our risk. And there are a whole host of other reasons why hazard mitigation planning is important. This just really highlights some of the big ones. The hazard mitigation plan really has a very broad audience. So this plan is a really great tool for members of the public to better understand their risk and ways that they can prepare. But this plan should also be a tool for our planning partners to think about ways they can integrate risk reduction techniques into their everyday programs and policies and projects. There are a lot of regulations and guidance that we do need to follow in updating this plan, including guidance from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and also the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. So as you can see, this is a very large plan. It has a very broad audience ranging from members of the public all the way up to our state and federal partners. I mentioned earlier that the hazard mitigation plan, by updating this every 5 years, it allows Philadelphia to be eligible for certain mitigation funding through FEMA. So what is that funding? First, there's the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP. This is a grant fund that is available after certain presidentially declared disasters. And it will fund some of the projects that may be eligible that we've included in our plan here today. There are also two opportunities that come about annually that are opened by FEMA, usually each fall. That's the Flood Mitigation Assistance Grant Program, which focuses on reducing risk to NFIP insured properties. And then the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Community Grant, or the BRIC funding source, which could also potentially fund some of the projects in our plan. And we know that there is the amount of money that's been going into these programs has only been increasing over the last few years and will continue to increase moving forward. So another good reason to make sure this plan is updated and that we have some really great priority projects to start pursuing in the next few years. All right, so what did the 2022 planning process look like? We first hosted a kickoff in February of 2020, and then spent the next year or so really trying to build out our planning team. And we had about over 80 agencies or organizations representing state, federal, and city agencies, as well as our private sector partners and our community organizations participate in this planning process. Next, we conducted a risk and vulnerability assessment. And this is where we really looked at how has our risk changed over the last 5 years since our 2017 plan. And so we updated our list of hazards based on input from the public and from subject matter experts, and really took a look at what our vulnerability was to those hazards. Next, we assessed our capabilities as a city to actually implement mitigation and risk reduction activities. So what is the staff capacity? What is the funding capacity? What do we have in terms of education and outreach to better communicate our risks to the public? These are all things that we looked at. We also looked at what are our gaps and what do we need to fill in the next 5 years so that we can better implement risk reduction techniques. Next, we developed our mitigation strategy. And this part of the plan really outlines what are our goals and objectives as a city for reducing risk. And it identifies a prioritized list of mitigation projects, plans, and policies that we would like to implement over the lifespan of this plan, which is 5 years. And finally, we looked at plan maintenance and adoption. So thinking about how can we make sure this plan is a living document and something that we're really working on implementing over the next 5 years, and not just something that that kind of sits on a shelf to update in the next 5 years. And we'll talk a little bit more about ways we're thinking about implementation a little bit later in this presentation. And then finally, this is the part that we're in right now, which is public review and then approval from PEMA and FEMA. and then adoption by City Council prior to the plan expiring on May 25th of this year. So this is kind of a high-level look at what that planning process looked like. And again, this has been about a 2-year process with a lot of different stakeholders involved. So we're excited to be presenting the results today. Building the planning team. So we did convene a steering committee for the Hazard Mitigation Plan update, and they started convening or meeting in December of 2020. And you can see that the steering committee was made up of a wide range of different representatives from different city agencies, which you can see on this slide here. And the steering committee was really tasked with guiding the development and update of this plan. And they were the key decision makers in terms of project selection and prioritization, and project selection for which projects should move on to the state application process for some of these grant funds that I had discussed previously. I also want to highlight that OEM was awarded funding through FEMA's pre-disaster or PDM mitigation grant, which we used to bring in outside support, which was WSP, to support the plan update, and specifically some of the more technical parts of the plan update that we didn't have that expertise in-house. I mentioned earlier that we really did conduct extensive stakeholder engagement over the last 12 years, over the last 2 years. We had about 12 steering committee meetings, 5 stakeholder workshops, numerous work groups and focus group meetings, a lot of different opportunities for the public to get engaged through community workshops, radio shows, and hazard mitigation station table events. We also released a public survey. We had it open for about a year, and we received 397 responses to that public survey, which helped to inform the update process throughout. And as I mentioned earlier, we had over 80 agencies and organizations represented throughout the planning process, which is great. I think in the 2017 plan, we only had about 30 or 40, so we did go up significantly between the 2 different plan updates. And of course, because of COVID-19, we wanted to make sure that our outreach to our stakeholders and to the public was safe. And so a lot of our outreach was conducted virtually, but despite having virtual engagement most of the time, we still managed to keep the content engaging and interactive. And we did have the opportunity to do a little bit of in-person outreach this past summer in a safe way through our hazard mitigation table events. So you can see some snapshots of some of the engaging events that we had hosted over the last 2 years. So what are some of the big updates that you're going to see in the 2022 plan when you get a chance to take a look at it? Well, first, it was a priority from the start of our planning process to create an accessible, inclusive, and equitable planning process throughout. And you'll see this goal really reflected in our updated goals and objectives in the mitigation strategy of the plan. We were very intentional about our outreach and engagement to the public and tried to create a wide variety of different types of opportunities for the public to be engaged, to encourage people to be a part of this planning process. And we really tried to focus on reaching populations that are typically underrepresented in government planning processes, and also focused on trying to reach populations that are disproportionately impacted by disaster, which could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because of geographic exposure, intrinsic factors like age, or populations that were placed at risk due to historic inequities or underinvestment. You'll see in the risk and vulnerability assessment, and actually throughout the plan, that we provided a lot of additional information in this plan and census data on populations that are disproportionately impacted. And we're hoping this can be used as a tool by our planning partners as we're looking to invest in mitigation actions that reduce risk to those populations. And then finally, you'll see that as we prioritized our mitigation actions, we added equity as one of the factors that we looked at. So really trying to prioritize those actions that are addressing populations we know are more at risk here in Philadelphia. Climate change integration. So a lot has changed in terms of available climate data since the last plan update in 2017, and we wanted to make sure that that was included throughout the plan. And so you'll see in our updated goals and objectives that this is reflected and that we really are intentional about trying to create a more forward-looking plan that considers not only today's risk, but our future risk to hazards. We have updated climate change, temperature and precipitation projections, which we worked on with WSP. And this is based off of the climate projections from the Office of Sustainability's 2016 Growing Stronger report and updated and included in the plan. We also looked at sea level rise in our risk and vulnerability assessment, specifically in our HAZAS analysis. So our HAZAS analysis looks at what buildings will be impacted, what might be the economic impact, the amount of debris created by various different types of natural hazards. And so for our flooding HAZAS analysis, instead of just looking at the 1% or the 1% annual chance flood event, we also looked at what would be the impact based on future sea level rise projections. And so you'll see that incorporated in the flood hazard profile. And then finally, you'll see more projects that are really focused on forward-looking mitigation and adaptation techniques. So again, projects that are looking at today's risk and our future risk as well. And that is reflected in our prioritization criteria when you get a chance to take a look at that. All right, the risk and vulnerability assessment. So this plan update really gives us an opportunity as a city to look at what our risks were in 2017 and think through what has changed in the last 5 years and how has our risk changed. And so we have the opportunity to really update the hazard list and the list of hazards that we look at in our plan. And as I mentioned before, this plan looks at two types of hazards, both natural hazards and human-caused hazards and threats. And so to determine the new hazards in our plans, we looked at a few different things. First, we looked at what events have happened in the last 5 years that may have changed our vulnerability. We looked at the state hazard mitigation plan to see what hazards we're concerned about statewide. We gathered feedback from subject matter experts, all of our planning partners, as well as the public to better understand what the public is most concerned about. And we did that through a public survey and community workshops as well. And you can see the results of what hazards we included in the plan in the slide here. Anything in green is a new action that was not included in the 2017 plan, but is an action that you will see in the 2022 plan. So you can see we added pandemic and infectious disease, sinkhole, civil disturbance, cyber terrorism, gun violence, and the opioid crisis response, and terrorism as well. We also updated our hazard risk index, which is an approximate calculation of overall risk meant to compare overall risk between the different hazards in our plan. And so just the key highlights from this chart. First, flooding is our #1 natural hazard here in Philadelphia. This is what we identified in our 2017 plan, and that remains true in our 2022 plan. So definitely an area of focus throughout. And then of course, we added all of those new hazards that I just discussed into this hazard risk index. And actually a lot of the new ones did rise to a high level of risk, including gun violence, pandemic and infectious disease, and the opioid addiction response. You can see those rose to the top there. A new section that you'll see in the 2022 plan is a section around hazard risk in different planning districts of the city. And so you'll see that there's a section that really looks at what are the important considerations for future development based on hazard risk in each planning district. And again, we hope this will be a new tool that our partners and both our city partners and our private sector partners can use as we start thinking about how the city is going to be growing in the next 5 years. The mitigation actions. So this is the part of the plan that identifies the projects that our city can implement to reduce flood risk. So for the 2022 plan update, we reviewed what were the actions in our 2017 plan, what's changed, what's been completed, what maybe needs to be removed because it's no longer a priority or it's just no longer feasible. We consolidated some of the actions to create a really refined list that is easy to implement. We removed some actions that were a little bit more response focused or that described city capabilities and didn't necessarily focus on long-term risk reduction. And of course, we added new projects that were submitted by all of our plan stakeholders over the last few months. The result was 158 projects, plans, and policies that we hope to implement to reduce the city's long-term risk to hazards. This is less than the 2017 plan, but that is okay because that helps make the plan easier to track and to implement over time. So what are the types of projects that you'll see? They're listed here on this slide. So you'll see local plans and regulations. So things like plans, ordinances, policies, building codes, and updates to make them more disaster resilient so that we're thinking about how hazard risk influences the way that land and buildings are being developed. You'll see large-scale structure and infrastructure projects or modifications to structures to help them protect them from a hazard or remove them from that hazardous area. You'll see actions that address natural systems protection, restoring or preserving the functions of natural system in an effort to reduce hazard risk. You'll see programs around education and awareness to inform and educate citizens, elected officials, and property owners about what they're most at risk for and how they can play a part in risk reduction. And then finally, we also have a category around human-caused hazard casualty reduction. And these are actions that are focused on reducing injuries or loss of life from specifically human-caused hazards and threats. In the 2022 plan, we have a new section that's called Mitigation in Focus. So we selected 10 mitigation and focus actions, each which will feature a one-page spread with detailed information on the project, possible funding opportunities, and implementation steps. And the mitigation action focus, the mitigation and focus actions, they really do span a wide range of different types of hazards and agency leads. And each is considered a high priority project. And we're hoping this list will really provide the steering committee and the city with some key areas to focus in on in terms of implementation in the next 5 years. So I'll highlight a few of those projects now. The first one I want to highlight is an Office of Sustainability-led action. So it's a multi-departmental project that will focus, it's a place-based project focused on climate risk, adaptation, and resiliency planning. And this will be focused on or piloted in the Eastwick neighborhood with the hopes of taking what is learned through that planning process and then expanding it to other neighborhoods in the city. You'll see a few water department projects. These are large-scale infrastructure projects that address flood risk. You'll also see an action around alert and warning. So this project is focused on updating the city's alert and warning system and plans, expanding reach and focusing in on populations with access and functional needs, and on reaching populations that whose primary language is not English. So you can see more details on those actions and all of the other mitigation and focus actions in our 2022 plan, which is posted on our website. And then finally, another area of focus that you'll see reflected in the 2022 plan is plan maintenance and implementation. So we really wanted to focus in on how can we make sure that this is a living document that we're actually implementing within the next 5 years. And these are some things that you'll see. First, since our 2017 plan, Office of Emergency Management hired a hazard planning coordinator position. This is a full-time position, and some of the responsibilities include making sure that this plan remains up to date in between 5-year updates and helping to facilitate coordination around implementation of the hazard mitigation plan. So this is a new position focused on hazard mitigation planning that we're hoping will really push implementation forward. Second is coordination around grants and funding. And so about 2 years ago, the Office of Emergency Management, in coordination with our steering committee and the Mayor's Office of Recovery and Grants, really took a close look at these FEMA mitigation funds and how we could have a more coordinated approach as a city to pursuing those grant funds. And we have been successful in submitting several applications to these grant programs within the last 2 years. So that technical assistance will continue moving forward. And hopefully we can also start to look at other funding opportunities beyond the FEMA mitigation funds to implement a wide range of different types of actions. We also, our steering committee and some of the work groups that we formed for this plan, they will remain intact after this plan update. And the goal with that is that they will help to kind of push plan implementation forward and really be that guiding hand. So we're excited to keep these, the steering committee and the work groups convened so that can remain a focus, not just in the Office of Emergency Management, but across city departments. And then finally, you'll see in the plan maintenance section that we do have a schedule for annual plan reviews and updates. So we will be focused on convening partners at least annually and also after major events to make sure that we are updating the plan and that it reflects the most current risks and hazards and projects that we're implementing in between those larger 5-year updates. So what part of the process are we in now, and what are kind of the next steps in terms of plan review and adoption? So today we're having our draft review workshop. As I mentioned earlier, this is really the kickoff to the 30-day public review period. So this plan will be posted on our website. You can provide feedback. We will review that feedback and incorporate the feedback into the plan before submission to FEMA, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. So you'll have until March 3rd to review the plan, provide that feedback. We will then submit it to FEMA, who will review it, make sure that we followed all of their guidance and regulations. FEMA will send us some feedback, which we'll incorporate into the plan before submitting this to the next stage in the plan review process, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. FEMA will go through their review process, send us some feedback, which we'll incorporate into the plan. And then hopefully we'll receive what's called approval pending adoption, which means our plan is approved, but it still needs to be adopted formally by City Council. So we hope to bring this plan in front of City Council for adoption in May of 2022, before the plan expires on May 25th of 2022. So that gives you a little bit of an outline on where we are right now and where we're going next. We really would love to get your feedback on any portion of this plan. We want to make sure that this reflects the goals and priorities and concerns of our city planning partners, our city residents, and the city as a whole. So how can you do that? How can you submit your feedback? Well, first, you can visit our website, which is on the board, or not on the board, on the PowerPoint slide there. So visit us online, review the workshop, review the plan, and submit your feedback. You can do that one of two ways. You can submit via a feedback form, which I have screenshotted on the left, or you can just simply email oem@phila.gov and that will be routed to me. We'll take a look at that feedback and incorporate it into our plan. We also will have several printed versions of the plan available at several free Library of Philadelphia locations. Those locations will be posted on our website if you're interested in viewing that in print. All right. Before we move on to questions and answers, I just want to thank all of our partner agencies, the community members who've been involved, all of our stakeholders on the call today that really supported this plan update over the last 2 years. I also just want to especially thank our steering committee who's been meeting monthly for the last year to help facilitate this plan update. And finally, of course, thank you to WSP, our contractors who also help support this plan update. And if you have any questions or concerns after this workshop, or you just like to provide more feedback, please feel free to reach out to me. Emma Giardina, I'm the Infrastructure Program Manager here at OEM, and you can reach me most easily at oem@phila.gov. That will be routed directly to me. And so now I am going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to open up to questions and answers. And I encourage you to submit any questions that you might have through the question and answer portion, or there's a little icon at the bottom that says Q&A. You can submit questions there, and we will address them. And I have a few other city representatives on the line who we may be able to kind of direct some of these questions to, depending on what their expertise is. All right, bear with me while I bring this up. Okay, so the first question, I feel it's important to see the recommendation from 2017 mitigation plan to prepare our comments so that they aren't lost. Okay, the 2017 plan is referenced but does not have a live link. Yes, so I agree. We can definitely make sure that there's a link to the 2017 plan on our website. It should be there. If you scroll down, there might be a list of documents with the 2017 plan available, but we will double check that after this workshop to make sure that you can look at the 2017 plan, look at the draft 2022 plan, and compare those before providing feedback. All right, the next question. Can you please clarify what the city means when they are making communities more sustainable? In Eastwick, for example, a berm is being considered to help make the planet streets more sustainable, making sure that we're not just pushing the problem, but we're finding a long-term solution here. So I believe that we have Salim Chapman, the Chief Resiliency Officer from Office of Sustainability on the line. Salim, is this a question that you would be able to answer?
Sure. So yeah, the clarification probably isn't, the word sustainability probably isn't the right framing. What we would probably say is to make it more resilient. And when we think about that, that's really to make sure that we're taking into account both, the chronic conditions that make Eastwick vulnerable, as well as some of the more extreme events that you might see from sort of storms and flooding events. And so, that changes over time as, what we expect to see from climate change will change over time. And so our planning efforts is in alignment with that in the context of making sure what we do doesn't have a negative impact on anyone else. You'll see that the top two projects that Emma talked about was one, the Lower Schuylkill, the Lower South as a whole, as well as Eastwick. And so that's really to making sure that we're taking a more comprehensive view in terms of what interventions we do in that area to make sure that everyone collectively is more resilient, as opposed to just transferring the problem onto someone else.
Great, thanks so much, Salim. All right. For clarification, do you say that the climate change data is based on the Office of Sustainability's 2016 plan? And is that data out of date? So thank you for asking the question. To clarify, we took the approach from the 2016 plan and updated the data so it is up to date. And I do see that Sarah Bowen, who is from WSP, just turned her camera on. So Sarah, your team really worked on this analysis, and so you might be able to speak to this question a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, sure. Something that we wanted to do in this plan is integrate resiliency items into the planning process for sure. And we have a colleague that worked on the older plan from 2016 that now works at WSP, Rollins Miller. And so she was able to update both the predicted precipitation data and update the kind of the temperature that's expected over time data as well. And so those were updates that we integrated into the analysis for this plan that could be helpful in other planning processes as well.
Thanks, Sarah. And you will see more information on that process and the results of that process in the risk and vulnerability assessment portion of the plan under extreme temperatures, and I believe flooding as well. All right. The next question, given the impact of COVID-19, the WHO and a number of experts continue to encourage investing in long-term, durable, non-invasive mitigation measures in indoor air quality, which can suppress transmission, remove pathogens, and improve overall health. To what degree would the Building Resilient Infrastructure or other grants be an opportunity for Philadelphia to invest in healthy buildings, such as improved ventilation and filtration? And to what degree is this in the scope of our resiliency planning? And so what I would say to this is that we did work with our Philadelphia Public Health Department throughout the update of this plan. They did help us to craft the pandemic and infectious disease hazard profile, and even submitted several mitigation actions focused on reducing future risk to pandemic and infectious disease. So I don't recall off the bat if any of those actions addressed improved ventilation and filtration to city facilities. That is something we can look at, and we can discuss with the public health department if we should include that in the plan moving forward. So I appreciate that feedback, and we can definitely follow up on that. And is this an opportunity is there an opportunity for FEMA funding for these projects? And that is, again, something we can look into. We'd have to look at the eligibility requirements to make sure, but I think that this is great feedback, and thank you so much. Sure, so the next question. FEMA has put a lot of emphasis on community lifelines. In your plan, do you have a committee or group that deals with infrastructure, critical needs, restoration, economic recovery of the city? And even a point of contact would be helpful. So that's a great question. Absolutely, you will see that we have also put an emphasis on community lifelines throughout our plan. Our mitigation actions are all prioritized. One of the criteria that we look at in prioritizing those actions is, does this address a critical facility or a critical process? And so you will see several actions in our plan that address that. And we did convene an infrastructure focus group in the spring of 2021 to help kind of provide feedback on those sections of the plan and give us some tips as we began the update. So we did work with that group, and we can follow up with you offline if you would like us perhaps to talk about this in more detail. If you want to email us at oem@phila.gov with this question, we can follow up with a more detailed response for you. With the last event that created a tsunami, has the city drafted anything in case of an Atlantic tsunami? So our hazard mitigation plan does not include tsunami. We tried to focus on the hazards that are going to put the city most at risk, that are most likely to occur here and would really stress our resources. And so we did not include that in our plan. Okay. Explain the emergency plans designed to warn residents about flooding and extreme pollution emissions from the refinery. Please include possible escape routes. So Oh, sorry, I just lost the question. So let's see. There it went. Okay. So the scope of this plan, we have emergency plans, but the scope of this plan is really just looking at what is our risk and what are we doing to reduce our risk. I can't at this point explain in detail those emergency plans, but if you would like to, you can follow up at oem@phila.gov. I want to make sure I get you the right answer to that. So please follow up at oem@phila.gov and we can address that question offline.
Emma, I could add to that a little bit. We do have a couple mitigation actions in the plan. We have one that focuses on brownfield remediation, and we also have a few that focus on alert systems. And so I think the general idea as it applies to mitigation is covered in the plan. And then specific escape routes and evacuation would be addressed in other planning mechanisms.
Thanks so much for adding that extra details there. And it looks like I got another question through the chat feature. Provided the 30-day window given for feedback, how soon will the public be notified of the library locations with the paper, the copies of the plan? Yes, so I can confirm right now that there will be paper copies of the plan available at the Eastwick Public Library and the Roxborough Public Library. We are looking for a third location that I hope to finalize today and have posted on our website today, if not tomorrow. And we're looking at a different area of the city, hopefully in North Philadelphia. I just need to confirm with that library before publicly posting that location. But I definitely see your point that you want to make sure you have plenty of time to review that. So please keep an eye on our website either this afternoon or tomorrow first thing for an update on the other third location. Sure. Can you explain how the 2022 All Hazard Mitigation Plan recommendations will be formalized and implemented by the Planning Commission, School Board, and other land use decisions? For example, there are several large open tracts in Eastwick, and there's been discussion around these areas and what we'll be doing in terms of development. So the Hazard Mitigation Plan, most of the agencies you referenced here, they were included in our 2022 planning process. We worked very closely with the Planning Commission throughout, and they were represented on our steering committee board. And so you will see actions related to their work in this plan. Let's see, in terms of Eastwick, I cannot speak to the Eastwick and what the plan is for those areas, but I will open it up if there's anybody who is part of the panel that does want to speak to that question a little bit in more detail.
I can add to that a little bit, Emma. So the hazard mitigation plan is generally like a step before land use decisions. And so it's looking at these issues more broadly. So there's a few actions in the plan that address the community of Eastwick and different mitigation measures that would be helpful to them, a planning process and recognition of some of the planning processes that are ongoing in the capability strategy, and then also the mitigation strategy of the plan. And so I think, you know, the plan outlines these steps and aims to get more funding available for planning and implementation. And then some of those specific land use decisions about what happens to a particular parcel will happen later on in the planning process. This plan is a little bit kind of more big picture and strategic.
Thanks, Sarah. And we hope some of the information in this plan can be used by our planning partners when they get to that point in the process. So Thank you. All right, I have another question. Does the plan address improvement in reducing risk of flood overflow from upstream communities? So does this address flood risk as a result of things that are happening upstream, and how that impacts communities such as Eastwick? So I will say that we have been a part of Office of Emergency Management recently. Became a part of a regional hazard mitigation plan work group that was just convened by Montgomery County back in the fall. And we hope to work closely with that team to look at not just mitigation actions here in Philadelphia, but what are some potential mitigation actions that we can work on a more regional level. So we're definitely at the beginning stages of that process. And that would definitely include, obviously, a lot of our city stakeholders, the water department, the Office of Sustainability, in terms of really identifying the most impactful risk reduction projects that might be more of a regional scale than just a city scale. So that's great feedback, and thank you so much. All right, I'm going to give it one more minute. If there are any last minute questions, please make sure to type them into the Q&A box at the bottom. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions come up. I just want to highlight one more time that we really appreciate all the feedback that we received in this meeting. We will be documenting this feedback and taking a look at it as we create our final version for submission to Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency in early March. We also encourage you to take a look at our plan in more detail, which is publicly posted on our website at www.phila.gov/ready. You can send feedback by emailing oem@phila.gov, or you can submit your feedback in the feedback form that is linked to our website. So we definitely encourage you to take a look at that and would love to hear any feedback that you have. I want to thank everyone who is a part of this call today, everyone part of our steering committee or the planning process throughout. We really appreciate this, and we're excited to hear what you have to say. I just want to see, Carolyn, do you have any final words before we close out?
Hi, everyone. I just want to thank everyone again for participating in today's workshop, and these questions are fantastic. The comments are great. As Emma said, please be sure to visit our website, and we will make sure to get those library locations out by the end of the day today. So thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you, everyone. I do see we have a few questions that popped into the chat, so I will type answers to those. But everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.